I'm sorry, I'm being assigned to who? Dakota Dempsey nearly dropped her coffee as she stared at her supervisor. Adrian Fielding, her boss repeated, tapping the sleek black folder on her desk. Yes, that Adrian Fielding, the CEO of Fielding Innovations, multi-millionaire, impossible to please. And now your new client. Dakota's stomach did a flip. Why me? Because you're our best account manager and because no one else wants him. Her boss gave her a tight smile. Look, I know he's intense, but if you pull this off, it could change everything for you. She didn't need changing. Her life was fine, predictable, safe. She liked her quiet apartment, her color-coded planner, and her coffee just the way it was calm. Adrian Fielding didn't sound calm. Still, she took the folder, walked out of the office, and told herself she could handle this. It was just another client. A high-profile one, sure, but a client nonetheless. That was before she walked into the top floor of Fielding Tower and saw him. Adrian Fielding stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, gazing out a wall of glass that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. His dark navy suit was tailored like it had been sewn onto him, and his presence filled the room like thunder. I was told you're the new liaison, he said without turning around. Dakota cleared her throat. Yes, I'm Dakota Dempsey from Lark & Co., he turned. And that's when her heart, without her permission, stopped for a beat. His eyes were storm gray, his jawline could cut glass. And when he looked at her, it felt like he already knew every secret she'd ever had. You have any idea how many account managers I've fired in the past year? He asked. No, she said honestly. 5, she blinked. Well, that's comforting, he cracked the faintest grin. You're the first one to say something back. Maybe this won't be a total disaster. It was supposed to be a straightforward business relationship. But nothing about Adrian Fielding was straightforward. By the second meeting, he was already challenging her strategies. By the third, he was calling her Dakota instead of Miss Dempsey. And by the fourth, he was showing up behind her chair, leaning down to whisper, "You missed a 0," in her ear with a voice that made her spine tingle. Still, she kept it professional. Mostly, until the gala, she didn't want to go. She hated dressing up, hated feeling like she didn't belong in rooms filled with money and power. But he asked no, told her to attend. You're the only person I trust to speak to the board, Adrian said, handing her a black envelope with a quiet intensity in his eyes. And I need you there. So she went. And when she stepped out of the car in a sleek black dress rented, of course she watched Adrian's expression shift ever so slightly. His eyes dragged down her body with a heat that made her forget how to breathe. You clean up well, he said quietly, offering her his arm. She took it. You're not so bad yourself. Inside the gala, everything shimmered chandeliers, champagne, people, but Dakota couldn't focus on any of it, not when Adrian kept his hand on the small of her back. Not when he leaned down to murmur comments that made her laugh, even when she didn't want to. Not when he introduced her to billionaires and executives like she was someone important. She started to forget she was just an account manager. Then, during a lull in the evening, they ended up alone on the rooftop terrace. The city glittered below them. Champagne bubbled in her glass, and Adrian stood too close, his expression unreadable. You're different, he said. She arched a brow. Is that a compliment? It's a problem, he replied, voice low. Why? Because I don't get distracted, and you're a distraction. Her heart pounded. We're just working together. Are we? She didn't answer, couldn't, not when he was looking at her like that. Not when his hand brushed hers and her body lit up with electricity, but she pulled away first. We should get back. He didn't stop her, but he didn't look away either. And when she walked back into the ballroom, her chest ached like she'd left something behind. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and tension. Adrian kept his distance, professionally at least. But every time their eyes met across the table, every time his hand brushed hers by accident, the air between them crackled. Then came the gift, a box. No note. Just a sleek velvet case waiting on her desk. Inside was a watch, elegant, understated, beautiful, she called him. Why did you send me a watch? Because you're always early, he said, and I like that about you. You can't just buy people things. I didn't buy it for people. I bought it for you, she swallowed. Adrian. I know, he said, it's complicated. And it was, because she was just an employee and he was her client. A very rich, very powerful, very off-limits client, but one night everything changed. They were working late. Everyone else had gone home. She was sitting across from him, surrounded by papers, when she looked up and found him staring at her. "What?" she asked. He stood, walked around the desk, then without a word he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, her breath caught. "I've tried. I've told myself this is wrong, that I shouldn't feel this way, but every time you walk into a room it's like the world stops. Adrian, I know I'm your client. But I want to be more than that." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you saying?" He leaned in. "I want you, and I don't care how complicated it is." She didn't stop him when he kissed her, and when their lips met, it wasn't soft, it wasn't careful. It was everything they'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, her heart was racing. "This isn't just a fling," he said. "I don't do flings." She looked up at him, eyes wide, heart open. "Neither do I." Dakota hadn't meant to fall asleep on her sofa. She woke just before dawn, the watch on her wrist catching the faint light filtering through her curtains. It was still ticking. She hadn't taken it off. Her fingers brushed over the smooth leather strap as her mind flooded with what had happened the night before. The kiss. His confession. The way her entire world had tilted in one breathless second. She exhaled slowly and stood, her body still humming with the memory. She didn't know what came next, but she knew she couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The following morning brought rain, the kind that painted the sidewalks silver and made the city feel quieter than usual. She walked into Fielding Tower with her coat damp and her heart undecided. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and she stepped into a hallway she now knew too well. But when she reached the office, it wasn't Adrian who greeted her. It was his executive assistant, Nina. "He's not in yet," Nina said, barely lifting her eyes from her tablet. "He had to take an unscheduled meeting across town. He'll be back this afternoon." Dakota nodded, grateful for the space, even if it left her more uncertain than before. She retreated into the glass-walled conference room and immersed herself in the project reports. But her concentration slipped every time she thought about the way his voice had changed when he said he wanted her. There had been no calculation in his tone, no agenda, just Adrian. By the time the door opened that afternoon, she was standing by the whiteboard, red marker in hand, trying to map out a client integration strategy. She turned, and there he was. This time he looked different. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression unreadable, like he'd had a long morning and wasn't sure what to do with the rest of the day. "You're early," he said, setting a folder on the table. "You're late," she replied, not missing a beat. He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Fair enough." She set the marker down and faced him fully. "We should talk." "I was hoping you'd say that," he said, walking toward her. "I haven't stopped thinking about last night." "Neither have I," she admitted, her voice low. "But I need to know what this means. Because if it's just attraction, it's not," he cut in. "Attraction doesn't make me rearrange my entire morning just to avoid saying something I wasn't ready to say." "What weren't you ready to say?" He paused, his jaw working like he was trying to find language for something he'd never said out loud. "That I don't want to keep this professional anymore." Silence stretched between them, taut and electric. "I need to be sure," she said, folding her arms to steady herself. "Because I've worked too hard to be seen as serious in this industry. I'm not walking into something that'll make me a rumor in someone's boardroom. I wouldn't let that happen to you," he said, "but I get it, you don't trust me yet." "I don't know if I trust what this is yet." He stepped closer, the air changing as he spoke. "Then let me show you." That night, she didn't go home. Instead, she followed Adrian into a waiting car that swept them into the heart of Tribeca, where he led her up a private elevator into a penthouse that stretched across the entire floor of a converted sugar warehouse. The walls were exposed brick, the floors dark wood, and the windows framed the city like art. He poured her a drink without asking what she wanted. Somehow, he already knew bourbon neat. "You live here alone?" she asked, taking the glass. "I don't bring people here," he replied, handing her the drink. "You're the first." He didn't say it like it was a line. He said it like it was a truth that surprised even him. She wandered to the windows, watching the lights blink far below. "This place." It suits you? I used to think it was too much, he said behind her, too big for one person, but now, it doesn't feel as empty. She turned to him, the space between them quiet and charged. What do you want from me, Adrian? He didn't flinch. Something I've never asked anyone for. She waited. I want your trust, your time. I want to know how your mind works when you're not editing yourself. I want to see what makes you laugh when you're not trying to impress anyone. And what do I get? She asked, not as a challenge, but as a need. He walked to her, his gaze steady. You get me, not the version in a press release, not the guy who signs off on acquisitions, just me. She studied him, heart pounding. Then prove it, she whispered. He didn't touch her, didn't kiss her. Instead, he walked to a built-in cabinet, opened a drawer, and pulled out a slim black box. He handed it to her, and when she opened it, she found a key inside. Not to his apartment, a key card to a private gallery in Soho. I've been building a collection, he said, his voice lower now. It's not public, I've never shown it to anyone, until now. Why me? She asked. Because you'll understand it, he said, because I want to see what it looks like through your eyes. She closed the box slowly, her heart full and unsteady. You don't do anything small, do you? She said. No, he replied. Not when it matters. When she left that night, she didn't take the car he offered. She walked the 12 blocks back to her apartment under a sky that was still caught between dusk and midnight. She didn't know where this was going. But she knew it had already gone too far to turn back. Dakota stood in the middle of the Soho gallery, the key card still warm in her hand as the heavy door shut behind her with a soft click. The space stretched wide and quiet, the polished concrete floor echoing beneath her heels. Warm light spilled from track fixtures above, illuminating a curated collection of contemporary sculptures and paintings pieces that whispered of solitude, chaos, and longing. She moved through the space slowly, taking in every brushstroke, every jagged edge of steel and glass. She stopped in front of a large canvas charcoal swirls surrounding a single gold line that cut through the center like defiance. It was raw, beautiful, unapologetically vulnerable. Her chest tightened as she realized he hadn't just given her access to a gallery, he'd handed her a map to the parts of himself he didn't let anyone see. The sound of footsteps behind her didn't startle her. She already knew who it was. I didn't think you'd come tonight, Adrian said, his voice lower than usual, like it belonged to the silence this place demanded. She didn't turn around. I needed to understand what you wanted me to see. He joined her, standing just beside her shoulder, not touching. And you hide in plain sight, she said. You let the world think it knows you, but here, this is where the truth lies. I stopped trying to explain myself years ago, he said. Every time I did, someone used it against me, so I built something no one could touch. She finally looked at him. That's not what this is. This isn't untouchable. It's honest. He studied her face for a moment before speaking again. My mother used to take me to galleries when I was a kid. She said art was the only place she could breathe. After she died, I kept going alone. Dakota's throat tightened. How old were you? 13. She didn't offer sympathy. She knew he wouldn't want it. Instead, she said, that explains the silence in here. It's not loneliness, it's memory. He nodded once. You're the only person who's ever said that. They stood in front of the painting for a while, the city beyond the frosted windows humming distantly. Finally, he turned toward her, something unreadable in his eyes. I'm flying to Zurich tomorrow. There's a development deal that needs in-person negotiation. How long will you be gone? 4 days, maybe 5. She nodded, absorbing it. You want me involved? I want you with me. Dakota blinked. What are you saying? You're not just part of this project anymore. You're part of what I see when I look forward, her breath caught. I can't just disappear from the office. There are protocols. I already spoke to your firm's managing partner. I made a case for your presence overseas being essential to the project's success. You went over my head. I went through the proper channels, and they agreed. Your hotel and ticket are already booked. She stared at him, stunned. You planned this without knowing if I'd even say yes. I didn't plan it, he said. I hoped. The plane was waiting the next evening, a sleek private jet with walnut-paneled interiors and seats upholstered in butter-soft leather. She boarded with a single suitcase and a heart full of questions. They spoke little during the flight. She spent most of it reviewing documents on her tablet, pretending not to notice when his gaze lingered too long. But when the wheels touched down and Zurich's lights stretched beneath them like scattered stars, she felt it again, that invisible pull between them neither of them could name, but both refused to deny. The hotel was a converted manor tucked into the hillside, surrounded by trees dusted with snow. Her suite overlooked a frozen lake, and the fireplace in the corner crackled softly as she unpacked. A knock on her door came just past midnight. She opened it without hesitation. Adrian stood there, a bottle of wine in hand, no tie, shirt slightly undone, his walls lower than she'd ever seen them. "I couldn't sleep," he said. She stepped aside. "Neither could I." They shared the wine by the fire, both sitting on the floor, backs against the velvet sofa. He asked her about the first job she ever had. She told him about the bakery she worked at in high school, how she burned every batch of scones the first week but kept pretending it was experimental. He laughed, really laughed, and the sound curled around her like warmth. And then he told her something he hadn't admitted to anyone. "When I was 22, I lost everything I'd built in a bad merger. I had to borrow money from someone I swore I'd never speak to again. I rebuilt from scratch. I've never let myself forget how easy it is to lose everything." Dakota watched him carefully. "Is that why you always control the outcome?" He looked at her, eyes heavy. "Because if I don't, I lose more than money. I lose the people I let in." She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned in, kissed him, slow and certain this time. When they parted, he whispered against her skin, "Don't disappear when this ends." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Then don't give me a reason to." The next morning, the meeting went exactly as planned. Dakota presented the proposed strategy with quiet authority, outlining the market expansion with clarity that impressed even the most skeptical investor. Adrian didn't interrupt once he let her lead, and she didn't need his approval to know she'd nailed it. Afterward, they walked the snowy cobblestone streets. No entourage, no suits. Just two people navigating a city neither of them belonged to but somehow belonged to them, just for a moment. They stopped at a small outdoor cafe, the kind with wool blankets and lanterns. She sipped hot chocolate while he watched her like she was something rare. "You were never just an assignment," he said quietly. "Not to me." Dakota didn't look away. "Then stop treating me like a calculated risk." His jaw tightened, but not with anger. This time it was fear. "I'm not used to people seeing past the surface," he said. "It terrifies the hell out of me." "Good," she replied, "because what we're doing, it should scare both of us. That's how we'll know it's real." He didn't respond with words. He reached across the table, took her hand in his, and held it like it was the one thing tethering him to the world. And in that moment, she knew no matter how complicated it became, they had already crossed a line there was no coming back from. The elevator doors opened to the firm's lobby, and Dakota stepped out, her boots clicking against the marble as she carried the weight of the last week like it still clung to her skin. Zurich had changed things, not in the way of a temporary escape, but in the way that made returning feel like walking back into someone else's life. A life that no longer fit. She crossed the lobby, nodding at the receptionist without stopping. Everything looked exactly the same, but she wasn't. And it wasn't just about Adrian. It was about what she'd realized while standing beside him in a foreign city, holding her own ground, speaking with a voice that hadn't needed validation. She stopped outside her supervisor's office, knocked once, and entered. Her boss looked up from her laptop with an unreadable expression. "You're back early," she said. "I took the overnight flight," Dakota replied. "I wanted to talk." A pause. "Is this about Fielding?" Dakota didn't hesitate. "It's about me." She sat down, her shoulders square. "I've been thinking about the clients I've worked with, the hours I've put in, the results I've delivered. And I realized I've been working so hard to prove I belong here that I never asked for what I actually want." Her boss leaned back slowly. "Which is, I want to lead. Not just accounts, I want to build something. I want autonomy, and I want to choose the clients I work with, not just be assigned." The room was silent for a beat too long. "You realize what you're asking for isn't standard." "I'm not asking for standard," Dakota said. "I'm asking for earned." Her boss studied her, something shifting in her eyes. "You'll have it," she said finally, "but you'll be expected to deliver on it." "I will." When Dakota stepped back into the corridor, she felt it. Not pride, not relief, permission. The following weekend, she didn't wait for a call. She walked into the Fielding Tower on a Sunday afternoon, bypassed the empty reception desk, and rode the elevator to the top floor. Adrian opened the door himself, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes shadowed with something she hadn't seen before. "Not worry, uncertainty." "I wasn't sure if I'd hear from you," he said. "You didn't need to," she replied, stepping inside. "You said you wanted me to see the parts no one else does. I'm here to show you mine." He closed the door behind her but didn't move closer. "I've been thinking about what happens next," he said. "About whether this is something real or just something we're both chasing because it feels good." Dakota shook her head. "It doesn't just feel good, it feels right. And I'm tired of pretending I don't already know that." He watched her for a long moment, then walked past her into the living room. She followed. "I don't know how to build something normal," he said. "Everything in my life has been scaled, bigger teams, higher stakes, faster wins. But relationships don't work like that." "I don't want normal," she said. "I want honest, I want messy, I want yours." He turned and something broke open in his face. "I wake up thinking about you," he said. "Not the way you smile or the way you look when you're figuring something out, though, God, that's dangerous, but the way you make me feel like I can finally be still, that I don't have to keep proving myself." "You don't," she said quietly. He crossed the room then, took her hands in his, and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since Zurich. "I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn," he said. "It's not finished yet. I was going to flip it, but now I'm thinking about staying, about somewhere quiet. Somewhere with space for more than just work." She tilted her head. "Are you asking me to?" "I'm not asking," he said. "I'm hoping." Dakota's eyes stung, but she didn't look away. "I'm not ready to move in with you," she said, "but I want to see it. I want to walk through the rooms and imagine what mornings would feel like. I want us to build it slow." "Real," he nodded once, like that was more than he expected. "I've never done slow," he admitted. "Well," she said, threading her fingers through his, "there's a first time for everything." A month later, they stood on the top floor of the brownstone, sunlight spilling across unfinished floors. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the exposed beams, the cracked plaster, the promise. Adrian watched her, his arms folded over his chest. "I thought I'd make this room an office," he said. "But now I'm thinking library. That window's perfect for a reading chair. You read, not often. But I figured I'd start." She smiled, walked to the window, and looked out over the quiet street lined with trees just beginning to bloom. "We could put a small table here," she said. "For coffee." She glanced back at him. "I'm still not moving in." "I know," he said. "But you're picturing it?" "I am." Later that night, they sat on the floor of the main room, eating takeout from cartons and listening to a playlist she made on the flight home. No suits, no schedules, no investors. Just music and flickering candlelight and the sound of their laughter bouncing off bare walls. He leaned back on his elbows, watching her like she was already home. "I used to think success meant never needing anyone," he said. "But the truth is, I didn't know what success felt like until you walked into my life and made me want more." She reached for his hand. "I didn't know what more looked like until you saw it in me." He didn't kiss her then. Instead, he stood slowly, walked to the paper bag he'd left near the mantel, and pulled out a small box, no velvet, no ribbon, no drama. Just a clean, simple box that held something delicate and real. He returned to her, knelt, and opened it. It wasn't a ring. Inside was a key. "Not symbolic, literal, the brownstones." "I know we're not there yet," he said. "But when you're ready, I want you to have this, not because I expect anything, but because I want you to know this future is yours whenever you want it." Dakota looked down at the key, then up at him. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" "Not when it matters." She leaned forward, kissed his forehead, and rested hers against his. "Then stop hoping I'll walk away," she whispered. "I'm already here." And for the first time in years, Adrian Fielding didn't feel like he was standing on the edge of something that could collapse. He felt like he'd finally arrived. The first real test came sooner than either of them expected. Adrian stood in front of the boardroom window, hands braced on the glass, watching the clouds roll in over the Hudson. He'd just hung up from a call with his legal team that had confirmed what he'd already suspected: his CFO had signed off on a side acquisition without authorization, jeopardizing a project months in the making. It wasn't just a financial blow, it was a betrayal from someone he trusted. The fallout would be public, messy, and fast. Dakota stepped into his office a moment later, uninvited but not unwelcome, holding her phone loosely in one hand. "I just got word," she said quietly. "It's already hitting trade outlets." He didn't turn around. "They'll say it's my fault. That I got distracted. Are they wrong?" He finally turned to face her. "I stepped back to build a future. I let someone else hold the reins for 5 minutes and they drove us into a wall. Then fix it." He blinked. "Just like that, you're Adrian Fielding," she said. "You built this company from the ground up. If you can't fix it, no one can, but don't stand there acting like you're powerless. You're not." His gaze sharpened. "You're not afraid of me at all, are you?" "I'm not afraid of broken things," she said. "I'm afraid of people who pretend they aren't." He crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face with both hands. "I don't know how I ever ran this place before you." "You didn't," she said. "You just survived it." By the weekend, Adrian had made 3 decisive moves: terminated the CFO with immediate effect, appointed a trusted interim, and released a statement that was bold, transparent, and undeniably his voice. Dakota helped craft every word, her instincts sharper than any press advisor he'd ever employed. The media storm passed quicker than expected, with analysts praising his swift action and leadership. But something larger had shifted. He no longer operated alone. That Sunday, Dakota invited him to Queens. She didn't give him a reason, just sent a car and told him to dress down. He showed up in jeans and a slate gray sweater, his hair still damp from a shower, looking more like a man than a mogul. They spent the afternoon in a modest community garden where she used to volunteer before her career consumed her weekends. She handed him a pair of gloves and pointed to a row of overgrown basil. "I thought you said you wanted to see me outside work," she said with a teasing glance. "I didn't picture dirt under my nails," he replied, crouching beside her. "You'll live." They worked side by side in the sun, hands in the soil, laughter light and rare between them. She told him how the garden had kept her sane during college, how the older women who ran it used to give her unsolicited dating advice and homemade lemonade. He told her about the lake house he used to visit as a kid during summers, how it had smelled like pine and always felt too quiet. "You should buy it back," she said. "I checked," he replied. "It's still in the family, but I found one nearby, same lake, better view." She looked up. "You already bought it, didn't you?" "I did. Thought maybe someday you'd want to see what it feels like to wake up somewhere without street noise." "I might." That night, they lay on her tiny living room couch with takeout cartons balanced on their knees. He didn't complain about the lack of space or the missing air conditioning. Instead, he kissed her shoulder between bites and asked if she'd ever considered writing a book. "A book? You tell stories when you think no one's listening. They're good, you should write them down." She looked at him, surprised. "You think I have something to say?" "I think you're the only person I know who says things that matter." Weeks passed. Summer edged into early fall and the brownstone began to take shape. They walked through it on Sundays, arguing over light fixtures and kitchen tiles, not because they clashed, but because they both cared. One afternoon, standing in the nearly finished foyer, Adrian looked at her with a quiet certainty. "I want you to feel like this is yours." "I do," she said. "Not because of the walls, because of who's inside them." He kissed her then, not with urgency, but with promise. 3 months later, the brownstone was finished. She moved in on a crisp October morning, her books filling the built-in shelves, her plants lining the windowsills, her laughter echoing against the freshly painted walls. They didn't talk about labels or timelines. They didn't need to. One Saturday, as the first snow began to fall, Adrian pulled her outside without warning. She was still in her robe, barefoot on the porch, as he knelt in the snow and held up a second key, one engraved with both their initials. "No speeches," he said. "No questions. Just yes." She took the key, closed both her hands around his, and nodded through the cold. Yes, they didn't have a wedding with a guest list or a ballroom. Instead, they stood on the rooftop of the brownstone one evening in December, surrounded by candles and city lights, and exchanged vows they'd written alone. No audience, no press, just them. Afterward, they danced to a soft jazz record in their living room, barefoot and laughing, the fire casting gold across the walls. Years passed. She published a memoir that became a quiet bestseller. He stepped back from day-to-day operations at Fielding Innovations, appointing a new CEO and shifting to philanthropic ventures. Together, they launched a foundation focused on education and sustainable architecture. On their 5th anniversary, they returned to Zurich. Not for business, not for nostalgia, just to walk the streets again. This time, no secrets, no fears, just hand in hand, heart steady. They never chased perfection. They built something better, real, raw, and beautifully theirs. And every morning, without fail, Adrian brought her coffee before she woke up, left on her nightstand with a note that changed each day but always ended the same way: yours completely. Always.